We're going to continue with the parables, with the stories. And today I'm going to be talking about the drunkard and the jewel. So the story of the drunkard and the jewel. The story goes, the parable goes, that a man goes to his friend's house and he gets drunk and he falls asleep. So, yeah, we can relate. And this friend, whose house it is, he has to go away on business. So having to go away on business, he sews a priceless jewel into the man's garment. And the drunk man, knowing nothing about it, he knows nothing about it. So he wakes up, he goes to another country, and he strives for food and for clothing, and for years he labors diligently. He wants to be in comfort. He wants to be well and be prosperous. Later on in the parable, the man, this friend, meets the man who was drunk and says, he sees him in that condition. He says, "How is it that you've come to this? How is it that you've come to this state for the sake of food and clothing? I wanted you to be comfortable. I wanted you to be satisfied. So what I did was I sewed a priceless jewel into your garment. You're slaving yourself. How can you be so stupid? Go now and exchange this priceless jewel that you have, and that's going to free you from poverty, and it's going to free you from shortage." So it's quite a simple, small, short parable. And, one of the two symbols that I'm going to look at is drunkenness. Yeah. So drunkenness. Drunkenness in Buddhism is a state of spiritual unawareness, basically. It means we have no knowledge of a higher truth, no knowledge of an ideal, no knowledge of a reality, a higher reality. And we might not even acknowledge that the theoretical existence of this higher truth might exist. And we're drunk. That's the idea. We're drunk. We have a blurry vision. And if we were just a bit more sober, we could see things better. So it's not that we're bad. We're just drunk. But the thing is, I guess if you know what it's like to be drunk, or being around people who are drunk, they're very convincing, or at least they're convinced that they're right. They're convinced that they know what's going on. And actually, that's probably why a lot of people who get drunk get into fights. They're not only over emotional, but they're really convinced that their side of whatever's going on is right, and they can't see that maybe that's just not the case. So we're convinced, or drunk people are convinced. And it's quite boring to be with people who are drunk, isn't it? They think they're talking your language, but they just come up with things that often quite trite opinions of things, but they're sort of convinced, but they're not that enjoyable to be around. Buddhism says that we're drunk, and the Sanskrit term for drunkenness is pramada. Yeah, so pramada. So being apramada, so being non-drunk. So that's part of the goal of what we're trying to do in Buddhism, is trying to be with the least amount of drunkenness. So apramada actually means non-drunkenness, as little drunk as possible. And that's what we can hope to get to more and more. We just need to be a little less blurry visioned, a little less drunk. And how are we drunk? We're drunk in the way that we're overcertain, we're disinhibited in often the wrong way, We're drunk with self-righteousness. We're right. We're drunk with youth and beauty. We're drunk with authority. And we're drunk mainly with ideas about ourselves and ideas about the world and how it should be. So this drunkenness goes very, very deep, yeah? So what we're trying to do is just try to be as little drunk as possible, basically. And I was just thinking about sort of a more, day-to-day drunkenness. And the drinking culture has apparently changed. So people tend to not go out as much now, not get as drunk, I guess. Probably things are more expensive. That's part of the reason. Going to pubs more expensive. That's probably part of it. But one of the consequences one of the consequences is not socializing as much. We're basically not getting out as much. We're leading more secluded lives. In my group, in our group, we've been saying sometimes that we lead secluded lives in such a big metropolis, and that can feel quite lonely, actually. So I think what happens is that if we go out less, if we have a less social existence, then we find it hard to pick up on social skills, social cues. We find it hard to look at each other, don't we? It's interesting that the communication exercises often, from what I've heard, people say, "Oh, actually, I don't look at people like that, really, ever." We pick up on emotions in communication exercises. We pick up on emotions by looking at people, but now we tend to be more and more looking at screens, not picking up on sort of more subtle cues. So, and this is a good kind of example of this community, this being on retreat. It's a good example of being in community with more depth, more connection, more meaning. And really the spiritual community is an antidote to this drunkenness, yeah? And the spiritual community is important in a couple of ways. Firstly, that kind of normal, natural human connection, a positive human connection where we just feel loved. We also feel challenged when we need to be. We just feel a healthy sense of ourselves growing out more and more. And on the higher level, we have, on another level, the spiritual community can act, yeah? So it can act as a basis where sort of an actual real understanding of the Dharma can arise. So in a deeper level, the real spiritual community is somewhere where the values of the three jewels, the Buddha, the ideal of enlightenment, the teaching of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the community of enlightened individuals, that's at the center. So everyone is participating in this way in a real spiritual community. So we don't collude with each other, we don't gossip or backbite. We're trying to act more generously, more loving. We don't discriminate on any superficial preference, race, political party, even if that preference isn't the flavor of the day. So that is part of what it is to be in a spiritual community. And then what is it that kind of gives blood to the spiritual community? Well, just individual friendships, basically. So this thing called spiritual friendship, which you might have heard of, is an actual connection with people practicing these same values. So the Buddha said that the spiritual life that spiritual friendship is the whole of the spiritual life. he was asked by one of his disciples, how important is spiritual friendship to the spiritual life? Is it 10%? Is it 50%? Is it a bit important? Is it very important? And the Buddha said, spiritual friendship is the whole of the spiritual life. So we can think, okay, how does that actually work? It's the whole of the spiritual life. So what does that mean? Well, we'll experience that. We may have experienced that already. But just one point I'm going to make on this is that don't worry about what it's going to mean. Spiritual friends aren't there just for us to improve, yeah? They're not there just for us to, they're not there for our sake. It's the whole of the spiritual life because it's a pure enjoyment of friendship. It's a bit like what we've been talking about in our groups. It's this aesthetic, non-utilitarian enjoyment, pure enjoyment of friendship. Actually, it doesn't need to be a thing we gain anything out of. So, basically we need to find that community, that spiritual community that we've been talking about. So we need to, basically we need to figure out what it is we want. We need to have our time where we can see, for example, the gamut of different spiritual traditions, different spiritual schools. We can do our experimenting, our shopping, and then at some point, I think has been said already in the talks, we need to narrow our focus. And this narrowing of focus isn't a kind of loss of something, it's a going into more depth. Actually, people who I know who have narrowed their focus on a particular thing, a teaching or a school, and it doesn't have to be true Ratner as well, but people I know who have done that, what they seem to have gained is a spiritual weight. We call it a spiritual weight, a spiritual kind of strength that you can see you can just sort of sense from who they are, how they relate to people, is a sense of strength and of seriousness in the best possible way. So to get to achieve this kind of spiritual ballast, we need basically real connections in real situations in a real sangha. Because what happens, we need to apply these Buddhist principles to real life and often quite messy situations. And it can't happen if we're just, if our only source of inspiration is the Buddha, who lived 2,600 years ago, it's very hard to learn. I mean, only really exceptional individuals can learn from the Buddha alone. He's very far in time, he's very perfect, but the spiritual friend is close in time, and he or she, the spiritual friend, is very messy. So the Buddha is perfect, but the spiritual friend is messy. I need my friends, otherwise it becomes an abstract idea of what it is to live a spiritual life. I've been thinking more recently, just about the importance of spiritual friends in my life and the fact that actually I wouldn't do it without them. All well and good practicing mindfulness, practicing metta, practicing altruism, or trying to, but in a way it's just an idea if you don't have actual spiritual friends around you. I've got friends who are here, who I live with. I have friends to go home to. I have friends to practice along the path along the path with, that's what keeps me going, is I have this, not even a responsibility, is sort of deeper connection with someone who's on the same spiritual path. In a sense, you can see that, that is what the Buddha said. You can just see that as a whole spiritual path. Just being with your friend, being with someone who you're practicing with, there's a satisfaction in that, which actually is a bit, sometimes not very, sometimes we don't like to admit it. We like to say, yeah, we're doing it because we want to be more mindful, we want to be more outward going, altruistic, want to save the world. But what about, we want to live the spiritual life because we want to be in very deep harmony with a handful of individuals. So yeah, friends help us be as little drunk as possible. They point things out to us. They love us. So yeah, that's drunkenness. That's what we can do with drunkenness. That's how to combat drunkenness, yeah? So the other kind of symbol or motif, so motif is a sort of recurring image that happens in a particular work, is this priceless jewel. So if you remember, the jewel is sewn to the garment. So the jewel, as you may have figured, represents a higher truth, and it's a potential which is potentially existent within us. It's basically the philosopher's stone that turns things to gold, yeah, or that transmutes things to gold, and it represents this higher ideal of absolute Buddhahood, to which those who have dedicated themselves to the path, it's the absolute Buddha ideal of absolute Buddhahood, to which those who follow on the Buddhist path have dedicated themselves, basically. So when we do the refuges and precepts, we say, I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, I go for refuge to the Sangha. So we dedicate ourselves day in, day out to the ideal of enlightenment. We go for refuge, we don't sit back and let it happen. We go, we act, with our actions of body, speech and mind, we go for refuge to these precious jewels. So if we take it quite literally, we might think this parable quite literally. We might think that Buddhahood is just below the surface. And if we just apply the correct technique in meditation or something like that, then voila, we've gained enlightenment. Of course, it's never that easy, is it? And what actually the jewel represents is what this parable is trying to say is that there's a long process of transformation. So Buddhahood's not just below the garment, the surface. The garment can be read as like the thing we have to separate out from the jewel, the kind of mud, the non sort of the bits of us that aren't pointing towards the Dharma, towards the truth, towards the transcendental. So this process basically is a process of transformation where we have to really get the jewel and the garment and separate them. And how do we do that? Well, a few ways. Firstly, and we've been talking about this, I've been talking about this in my teaching a bit, is just cultivating attitudes that can bring that about. Not a technique, but an attitude. And the first and probably preliminary attitude is of receptivity. So I'll tell a story about a Zen master. So there was a student who went to go and see his master in the mountains, somewhere in Japan. And he came in and the master said, come in, take a seat. Would you like a cup of tea? And the student said, yes, I have a cup of tea. So the master started pouring the cup of tea, started pouring the tea into the cup, just like we did in the tea ceremony. And he kept pouring, and he kept pouring. And the cup was filling up, and eventually it was full, and then eventually it was overfull. And he kept pouring, and he kept pouring, and then the tea went onto the table, dripped onto the floor, and the student said, "What are you doing? You're spilling the tea. What are you doing?" And the master said, "Like this cup, your mind is already full of ideas and opinions. There is no room for anything new. To understand Zen, you first have to empty your cup, open your mind, and free it from preconceived notions." So that's like us, isn't it? We want to hear the Dharma. We want peace of mind, but we're not willing to empty our minds, to become receptive, and to admit that we might not know. But also, it's not only that. Our cups sometimes have holes in them, so that whatever comes into the cup very quickly just leaves the cup. I know I'm like that as well sometimes with my memory. I sort of, I really get into a particular, theme or inspiration, and very quickly that enters my cup and leaves my cup. But also importantly, I think, is that our cup can also have bits of poison in them. So that whatever we put into our cup becomes poisoned. And we can see that poison as cynicism. Yeah, we have a cup that's poisoned, or we can have a cup that's poisoned with cynicism. So someone's generous and we think, oh, they want something from us. Someone is friendly to us, and we think that they're trying to ingratiate themselves. So we can't really practice the Dharma as long as we have this kind of cynicism, this kind of poison in our cups. Bhante, my teacher, Bhante Sangharachta, the founder of this movement, I was reading something of his recently. He was saying that actually we need to take people more at face value than we often do. We often think, oh yeah, someone tells us something about themselves, and we try and figure it out, or we try and see, what's going on here? I'm guilty of this. I don't always take someone at face value. Actually, what he did often was he would take people at face value, and he wouldn't be swayed by others' opinions of them. He would make his own mind up. That's quite a difficult thing to do, I think, actually. So, yes, that's what we have to cultivate, is a sort of receptivity. And the other thing we've got to cultivate, which is sort of adjacent to receptivity, is that of preparing for life, preparing for meditation, and then, of course, preparing for death. So yeah, we're often quite in a hurry, aren't we? We're quite in a hurry, but we're not always, and we're doing something quickly, but actually being in a hurry and doing something quickly aren't the same thing. You can do something quickly without being in a hurry, but we tend to be in a hurry and flurry. No, we need to calm down. We need to prepare our lives. So we can apply that principle, say, to meditation. So, for example, here on the retreat, when we hear the bell, that can be after we scoff down the biscuits and tea. So if we hear the bell, okay, it's time to meditate, we drop what we're doing. We're aware that the bell was coming in the first place. We don't run to the shrine room. We take our time, making our way here with time slowly. So maybe if we're tired, we might even come a bit earlier. We might even come 20 minutes earlier to the shrine room, have a little nap, take in the atmosphere. Or if we need a bit more energy, we might come in and do some movements, some qigong, like we've been doing with Anna. But also when we come in, we can also start to orientate ourselves to something with more beauty. We can take in the image of the Buddha, the images of all these statues, the rupas of all the Buddhas. We can even make an offering, as I was saying earlier. We can even reflect on what it is that's brought us on the retreat and the conditions which led us to being here. We can reflect on the people that have helped us to be here in our lives. We can, sort of just reflect in that way that actually it is more than me that's just got me here, if you see what I mean. We could bring to mind moments in the retreat that have stuck with us, and then we have to meditate so we can get to our seats. Maybe we need more adjusting. We need our seats to be a bit more adjusted. Need to put another cushion in. Maybe we're cold, the shrine room's cold, we get another blanket. And then what we've been doing in the morning is reciting the refuges and precepts. We can even bring a particular Buddhist figure to mind, and then, only then are we ready. So we can really apply this principle to the whole of our spiritual life, the whole of our life really. Like if we want a meal, we need the whole gamut of ingredients, utensils, that kind of thing. So that's an attitude of preparation. And the other way that is sometimes interpreted, which also the jewel sometimes interpreted, which we have to beware of, is that the kind of modern secularized version of seeing seeing ourselves as a jewel as fundamentally good. Actually, I am fundamentally good. I'm fundamentally good. Well, you're also not fundamentally bad. Don't worry about that. And basically, we can think that we're fundamentally good, and the factors that prevent us from being, from becoming good, the garment, as it were, are the circumstances, the outer circumstances in the form of the social, the political, the economic. Actually, what Buddhism says is that we're both jewel and garment. Yeah, we're both jewel and garment. We both need to, we need to separate, don't we? We need to separate the jewel out and the garment. I'm not saying that these social and economic and political factors aren't important to our mental state. I'm not saying that they don't have a bearing on our spiritual life, not our political life. But Buddhism, we're transforming both the individual and the society. So we're starting with ourselves and we're transforming the society. I've been very struck with meeting upstairs in the Ambedkar room. I know some of you are in a group up there in the Ambedkar room. And he was a real sort of example of someone who made real political, social change where he helped convert hundreds of thousands of Indians to Buddhism who were oppressed by caste in the Hindu system. He was a devout Buddhist, and from his love of the Buddha actually, from his deep reverence, there was some sort of change that happened from his deep understanding of the Dharma. So we could do that. We could untie the jewel and the garment. That would be nice, wouldn't it? But why? Why would we want to do that? Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to become rich like the man in the parable? Well, why win the lottery? Why not? We want the best for ourselves, of course. But also just remember that, as we've been saying, these parables are outside of time. So outside of time, great. Within time, why we're doing this partly is because we're hurtling towards the end, aren't we? We're hurtling towards the end. We're hurtling towards death. And how do we do that? How do we take this jewel with us? We can't do it like the Egyptians did it, where they buried themselves with their gold, with their treasure. Beautiful image, isn't it? I really used to like the mummified sort of images and the pyramids and all the gold. But we can't do that, or we can, but that's not what we really mean. The real riches happens basically when we start to let go of what we feel like we are. What makes us feel like us, basically. So money, status, our opinions, our views, our physical body. I mean, this sounds quite easy, doesn't it? I don't think it is. I was brought up, in a working class family, and sort of found it very hard to feel. That's one of the things, I think, being brought up with not lots of money available, you sort of feel poor. You kind of feel poor, even though actually I was fine and well looked after and that kind of thing. I had no lack, but it's like a poverty mentality came with it. It was very, very deep. So these things aren't just letting go in a kind of superficial sense. I only really got a glimpse of what it was to not be poor when I came across a particular Buddha figure that represented something different. So that's when these real riches, this real jewel can actually arise, is when we let go of what makes us feel like we're us. Yeah. So this money, this status, our views, our opinions, our physical bodies, we have to let it all go. But we also have to let it go at quite a guts level, at a visceral level. So we have to eventually let go of the very, very deep instinctive urge to survive. That's what it comes down to as well. We have to let go eventually of that deep instinct. And then what happens when we can do that is that the real freedom and the real riches can open up. We let go of our personas, the different sort of masks that we put on in different settings. We let go of what we think we know. We let go of our ideas about life. We let go of everything. We let go of what we think we want. And there's nothing more challenging than that. That is the Buddhist call to action. We let go of everything. And we do it all at death anyway, don't we? We have to let go. I was very struck, actually, my grandfather died in January this year, and I was just so struck at the fact that everyone around him, myself included, he was clearly dying, but we weren't so aware that this is actually the situation. It's like everything else is going on sort of fairly normally. There was no sense of, actually this is going to happen to us. It was more of a sense of actually drunkenness, of like a blurry sort of, I'm not going to go there kind of thing. I guess with practice, you try and get actually, you try and sort of go towards that. You try and go towards people at death. You try and not see things so blurrily. So sometimes even people who we care about, who are close to us, who die, sometimes we still don't see it. We still don't see the fact that we need to let it all go. But the more important thing, the more positive thing, is that we can actually let go when we are alive. We can also let go before death, yeah? And when we do that, when we let go of these things that I've talked about, our personas, what we think we know, our ideas about life, and then that's when we can actually really live. That's when we become rich in reality. We become free, we become fearless, full of life. That's where life and love just rushes through us. We become a sort of beacon for life and love. There's no obstacles in the way, yeah? And really that is our only security, is to go towards that challenge, to try and live like that. That is the only security. Nothing else in this world, in this burning house, can be guaranteed. That's how you're going to be really rich. Yeah? That's how you're going to be satisfied. You're going to be fulfilled. And then if we do this, if we manage to let go, if we do realize this, then we don't have to fear physical death. We don't have to fear that. There is nothing to fear because we have fully just already done what we've needed to do. And, well, won't that be exhilarating if we're able to do that? Won't that just be the best thing?